Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, or depending on what time zone you're in, good evening. It's the top of the hour, so we're going to get started. Welcome to our webinar, AI in Action. This webinar is a follow-up to last month's webinar, AI with Purpose. But don't worry if you weren't able to attend that webinar. It will still make sense and you'll still be able to follow along. However, if you were part of that webinar, this will be kind of the second part where we put some of those topics that we talked about into action. So we may refer back to last month's webinar on occasion, and we of course invite you to catch up on that one on demand. But we're just really excited you're here today. My name's Erin Clark. I work at Endurance Learning. I'll be your producer today. And when I'm not producing webinars, which honestly is most of the time, I'm working to support the instructional design needs of our clients at Endurance Learning. On your screen there is a QR code. And that QR code will lead you to Endurance Learning LinkedIn page. We would love to have you follow us, so please pull out your phone and scan that code. And you might be asking, why? Why would I follow you? We are constantly posting about the world of learning and development, and we'll post articles, blog posts, podcasts, lots of the latest research and trends in the industry. Sometimes we post fun stuff like what type of Mr. Sketchmarker are you? You can take a little quiz to learn that. We post things we're proud of, and sometimes we post about our projects because we know that might inspire you with some ideas or things for your next project. So we'd love to have you follow us there on LinkedIn. I also want to note, we want you to stick around until the end of the webinar because we have two drawings today. The first will be a drawing for one of Brian Washburn's books, and you'll have a choice between instructional design on a shoestring, which focuses more on the tactics of instructional design, or What's Your Formula, which focuses on the bigger picture training program strategy. And we'll also have a drawing for one of our e-learning courses. And we'll talk more about those at the end of today's webinar. So please stick around until the end for that. And one more announcement before I introduce Brian. We hope you'll join us for next month's webinar, where we're focused on beyond engagement. And in that webinar in January, Brian will be demonstrating some activities that you can use to engage with your learners. And he'll be using those activities to demonstrate and show how the sequence, flow, and intent of your activities is really essential in determining if your session is merely engaging or if it's also effective too. So signups are open now. We'd love it if you join us for that webinar as well. Now, let me introduce you to today's presenter. Endurance Learning's co-founder, Brian Washburn, has been in the world of training and development for about 20 years. Most of his career was spent in the nonprofit space, but before launching Endurance Learning in 2015. He's published two full-length books and lots of articles on the topic of instructional design and training strategy. So we're really excited to have him lead our webinar today. So why don't I hand it over to you, Brian?
Thank you, Aaron. Just making sure that I was showing it up to everyone. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to our final webinar of the year. We have a bunch of people here who are joining us. Perhaps you're joining us for part two of our webinar from that we started last month, or perhaps you didn't even know about last month's webinar, and we're glad you're here. I may refer to last month's webinar, but you don't have to have attended it in order for this to make sense. So, but before we get going here, I would love to figure out, and I see that we're getting some hellos in the chat here, but I would love if you could share your name, your hometown, and a one-word resolution for 2026. Now, this is a tradition that I've been doing since I started my blog posts back in 2012, 2013. I saw somebody post about this concept of a one-word resolution. So instead of coming up with, a whole sentence or a whole thing that you want to do, just one word, like an intention that can help to frame your year for next year. So, for example, last year, my one-word resolution was thrive. And I was able to think about that word all the time. Both on a personal and professional level. I had a chance to do a lot of travel for work over the past year, doing train the trainer sessions. I was able to get to my 50th state because of a project that I was doing in Minnesota, which was close to North and South Dakota, which were my final two states. So if you do have any projects that are coming up in the new year, I love the work travel. So you can continue to help me thrive. Just feel free to reach out. But beyond that, my word for next year is marathon, which is something that I've just started to get back into running. So it's something that I would like to get more into, perhaps even physically run a marathon, if not a half marathon. But also, it's a good reminder that that kind of what we're doing is a process that takes some time to get there from start to finish. Even with today's topic, right? So, using AI for instructional design, it's something that, yes, their tools are out there, but we need to continue to work on ourselves and the way that we do things in order for us to be able to master some of the stuff that we're doing to get what we want to be doing. So let's talk about today. And I love seeing lots of the words that are coming in here. Regroup, I think, is a great one. Learner, grounding, appreciate, persistence, I think is a fantastic one. Hi, Valerie from Buffalo. Go Bills. And the idea of evolve is also something that could be really helpful. I'm just seeing all sorts of some cool stuff in there. So maybe there's going to be some, I'm pointing over here because this is my screen where I see the chat. Maybe there's going to be something that could inspire you as you're thinking about what your intention should be for next year. So let's talk about where we're going with today's webinar. So today, we're going to take a quick look again just at some different AI tools. We'll recap some of the tools that people are using that they told us that they're using from last month's webinar. And then you'll have not one, but two group challenges. So we'll be putting you into groups and you'll have a chance to play around with some AI tools. So our advisory is there, breakout discussions with plural are inside. But before we get into some of those discussions, we're also going to get a little nerdy in terms of learning theory and maybe what some of just kind of a heads up on some of the things that research says AI does well and some things that it doesn't quite do that well when putting together learning programs. All right, so let's take a look at what we had from last month. This is a list that was taken from when we asked people, if you're using AI, what tools are you using? And these were some of the tools that people put into the chat from last month. So as you're putting stuff into the chat, we do pay attention to it. And so we all know that I'm not the only person that holds a monopoly on all that is good and wise around AI. And so the more active you are in the chat, the more all of us can continue to learn. But you can see that people are using things for visual design, stuff like Canva and the AI that's embedded into Canva, AI for e-learning development when it comes to Rise or Storyline. Notebook LM is something that my colleague just showed me yesterday, which is a super cool, super powerful thing. If we can start to figure out exactly how we want to use it, I would definitely encourage you to kind of take a look at that. Magic School is an interesting one. Now, that is developed for K-12 lesson plans, but it is definitely something that helps people just to create a traditional lesson plan in and of itself. Well said, and 11 Labs focus a little bit more on voiceover, Camtasia, obviously video editing, Pictory.ai. My guess is that's more visual design. And then some people were saying that they're using internally created AI and LLM tools as well, which is super helpful, especially as we start to get a little bit nerdy about what the research says around AI and instructional design. Is helpful sometimes when you have something that is specific to your industry that is built out so that it's starting with a baseline of knowledge specific to your context. All right, so before we put you into groups, last month we talked a lot about some things that we can do with AI and that when it comes to the ADDIE process. And we also talked about things where there's still an important human element that's necessary. There's a big discussion just in instructional design circles around, will AI replace me as in my work and what I'm doing? And there's still, when it comes to quality learning experiences that can be created, there's still a really important role for human beings to play. Now, AI can make things faster, it can make things cheaper, it can make things better if we're using it right. But the first thing we need to do before I put you all into a group and start to actually generate something on your own, let's take a look at what some of the research says about AI, specifically in the field of instructional design. Now, I'm going to point out a few things that were from an article or from several articles that Dr. Philippa Hardman has posted in her newsletter. If you are not following Dr. Philippa Hardman, I really recommend that you kind of check out the work that she does because she does a lot around this idea of AI and instructional design. And so, in one of her recent newsletters, she was talking about 18 different research papers. Now, there's you can Google research in AI and instructional design. The challenge for me, anytime I do that, is I don't come from an academic or research background. And so when I'm reading through these pretty dry research papers, I sometimes struggle to make sense of it. And so people like Dr. Hardman or like Will Thalheimer, they'll take a look at the research and they can kind of translate it into words that make a lot more sense. And so in this one particular article, she was taking a look at 18 different research articles and what they said about how to use AI in instructional design. Now, there's a lot of good stuff in there. But what I'm going to have you do in just a few minutes is get together with a group and try to generate a training plan based on a challenge that I'm going to give you. Now, maybe you're already doing stuff like this, but there's some things that we need to keep in mind when we do something like this. And one of the things that we need to keep in mind when it comes to the research and what the research says about AI in instructional design, and this was really kind of an interesting nugget that I pulled out of this one article. AI generated content frequently lacks a deep understanding of learning science principles and struggles with contextual adaptation. So, what does that mean? Basically, in one research paper, they discovered that 78% of GPT-4 generated math lesson plans required significant adjustments to align with local standards and learner backgrounds, right? So this basically what we're saying here, and now may have been a study of K-12 lessons that are being evaluated. But if we think about this in our own context, so schools have their own local standards and they have their own learner backgrounds. We have the same, right? So we may not have local educational standards, but in our organizations, we have very specific organizational goals and organizational performance metrics that we're trying to adjust when it comes to learning programs. And so if we just type something into one of the tools that's readily available out there, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever it might be, it doesn't necessarily have our context, which might require significant adjustments to align with what it is that we need. The other piece that came out of this was really interesting when it comes to assessments. And this is one of the areas that people have talked about that they're really interested when it comes, or that people find AI does a lot of work for them, right? It's coming up with assessment questions. And what the research said, that same research paper, said that excessive AI use correlated with a 32% reduction in unique assessment designs among instructional designers. So, one of the things about AI is sometimes it has go-to assessment design that it will go to again and again if you let it. And so we do need to be careful about some of the stuff that we're just kind of feeding to AI because it's easier, because it's faster. Sometimes we might not be using the right stuff, something that you or I might come up with if we were to sit there and think about what is the kind of assessment that's appropriate here. And this research just kind of goes to back that up. Something else that Dr. Phil had in another newsletter that she wrote last year was around the tools that a lot of us are using, whether it's Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and how they work with instructional design. And basically her kind of conclusion was it'll get you somewhere, right? But there's a few things that we need to be careful about. One is that the AI oftentimes lacks industry specific knowledge and nuance. And this is what I talked about before. Some people, when it comes to AI tools they're using, are tools that have been developed internally, and they have a little bit more internal context. But if we're using some of these more broad, general purpose large language models or AI tools, it may really lack our own context. And we've run into the same issue when we've been working with some clients on this as well, is that sometimes when we'll ask AI to do something, it doesn't necessarily give us the right context. So we need to massage that. The second thing that she warns about is uncritical use of outdated concepts. And so things like learning styles, right? So, and this is not a time to get into the debate about learning styles, but the idea of designing specific to learning styles is something that a lot of us may have been exposed to maybe early on in our careers. But there's a lot of research out there that says while people have learning preferences, when you design specifically for learning styles, it doesn't really impact learner outcomes. And so sometimes the information that these models are being trained on will be outdated. And then the third thing that we need to be careful about is just superficial theory application. So sometimes these models, they're very smart, right? And they digest all this information, but they're not necessarily able to think critically about when to apply or how to apply different theories. So, for example, constructivism, right? This is a big word, oftentimes it's tossed around in educational circles. Basically, it's where learners actively build their own understanding and knowledge from experiences rather than passively receiving facts. And sometimes the AI tool will just insert learning theory into the design almost as a checkbox, but it doesn't necessarily do it in the context of what we're trying to develop, right? So all this is to say we should be using these tools in order to help us, save time on what we're doing. And we do need to make sure that we're reviewing what's generated, refining what we're asking it to do, maybe having it generate something again. So, that said, the reason perhaps that a lot of you are here today, we're going to start to play around with a few different challenges and see how this works. And so I'm going to, in just a few minutes, I'm going to break you up into small groups. And basically, what I'm going to ask you to do is to think about a specific challenge, and I'm going to give you that specific challenge. Or my colleague Rachel will actually drop into the chat a handout that has this challenge. But basically, with this challenge, what we have in this case, in this hypothetical case, is that we are the training team that works for an organization that requires all staff to complete 30 hours of professional development. So if you are working in the education field, or if you're working in early learning, or if you're working in a field where you have an educational requirement, this could really hit close to home. Some organizations also require this. When I worked for a nonprofit organization, I was actually the training director and was able to kind of slide in a requirement where we had to, based on kind of the ATD standard, I think that the standard that we were looking for was 25 hours of professional development each year. I was just talking with an organization recently that had a 100-hour requirement. So different organizations have different requirements. But for this particular example, your staff are required to complete 30 hours of professional development. Great. Now, the issue that this organization is seeing is that even though there's 30 hours of professional development that's required, supervisors aren't really reporting that people are doing anything new or differently or better as a result of this 30-hour requirement. And so the organization's starting to think, well, where's our money going if we're investing all this money into professional development and we're not necessarily seeing better performance? And so here's going to be your challenge when you are working in a small group. I need you to use the AI tool of choice. So you're going to be in groups of 4 or 5 people. I need you to kind of work together, decide what tool you want to use. It could be ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, or if there's another one that you're using, feel free to use that. But I wouldn't spend too much time trying to figure out which tool you want to use. Just pick one. And then design with your group, design a 2-hour design the training plan for a 2-hour instructor-led manager training session that addresses this problem. We have 30 hours of training. People don't seem to be using it. Once you design something, ask yourself in your group and be ready to offer some thoughts in the chat. Are the learning objectives what you need? Does this plan use good training design principles? And would you actually be able to deliver this as it's written? Okay, so we're just going to use AI just to generate something, see what it feels like. And if you have to kind of massage it, do some different things, go back to the prompt. One thing I will ask you to do, or not to do, actually, is don't copy and paste kind of what's in this handout and put it into the prompt. I want this to be a little bit more realistic. Obviously, in a realistic scenario, you don't have a nice little write-up like that that you can just kind of copy and paste in the prompt. So in your group, discuss what you want to put in as your prompt as you're starting to generate something and try to get a training plan that you would feel good about using. Right now, it is about 21 minutes after the hour. I'm going to give you about 15 minutes in your groups in order to just kind of think this through. And at the other side of that 15 minutes or 14 minutes, we're going to bring you back. We're going to have a little bit of conversation around it. All right. So for those that can't get into the breakout rooms for whatever reason, stick around and we'll do this here in the big room. And Jody just asked if we're able to share the challenge again written down. Jody, if you look in the chat, Rachel has posted a webinar handout, and that has all the information you need for that. And we're just asking you to do challenge number one. There's a second challenge on page 2. Don't worry about that one. All right. I think that we still have some people here. Unfortunately, everyone is on mute, so we'll have to kind of do this together in a group. So let me pull up an AI tool here. Hold on one second. And as I'm pulling up an AI tool in the chat, if anybody has any suggestions on an initial prompt we could use in order to generate a training plan, I would appreciate it. So go ahead and think about that in the chat. Give me some prompts that we can use, and we'll start to generate something here in just a moment. All right, BP has write me a prompt I can use with my AI tool that makes it use learning science and world-class instructional design when designing whatever learning output I ask it. All right, so there we have a general prompt there that is asking it to use learning science and world-class instructional design. If we had to think about this particular challenge, when it comes to we have 30 hours of training, we're not quite getting what we need out of performance, or we're not seeing a performance change. We'd like to work with our managers to help them kind of work with their own direct reports a little bit more, holding them accountable or whatever it might be. Does anybody have any thoughts on a prompt that could help us with this specific assignment? We'll start with you, BP. We'll see what we have here. All right. So what this has given us is it's given us a universal instructional design super prompt. So what we can do is we can start this, and now I see that Patrick has something in here. What I'm going to do is start with what BP suggested in the output here. So we're using the uni universal instructional design super prompt create, and I see Patrick has a lesson plan for getting 30 hours of professional development in a work environment. All right, let's see what we got. All right, so total duration. All right, so one of the things that we have not done here is modify this to be 2 hours, and it needs to be specified. All right, so modify this training plan to be 2 hours in person for managers. All right, so maybe the first place that we want to start is figuring out, are these the right learning objectives for us? And so we have, by the end of this 2 hour session, managers will be able to explain the components of high quality 30-hour professional development plan and analyze professional development needs for themselves and their direct reports using performance-based thinking, design a 30-hour professional development plan aligned with their own performance goals, and coach employees through professional development planning using a structured conversation guide. How do we feel about those learning objectives? Do you need to specify that the managers are the trainees? Is a question that Jennifer has. Do you need to specify that the managers are the trainees? Okay. Uh, in this session, managers are the trainees who are tasked with ensuring 30 hours of professional development uh, actually yields results among their direct reports. Now, this is interesting as it generates this because it's giving us its own thoughts in terms of what the current state is and what the desired state is. So it's telling us employees earn professional development hours, but often choose activities that don't connect to performance gaps, don't translate into behavior change, don't get reinforced on the job. Managers frequently treat professional development as compliance tasks rather than performance lever. Now, those are some interesting assumptions, but not necessarily. I mean, maybe they're true and maybe they're not. And of course, the prompt I gave you didn't actually give you context for that. But it is interesting to note that ChatGPT is making some assumptions right now in terms of what the current state is and what is leading to some of these behaviors. And then we have the desired state here. We have some learning objectives that are Bloom aligned, identify what makes professional development high impact versus low impact, evaluate the quality of direct reports professional development plan, coach employees in selecting professional development aligned to performance expectations, reinforce and measure the impact of professional development, and build a simple accountability system. All right, so for me, those objectives seem like they could be spot on. Why don't we take a look at what we have here when it comes to the plan? And as you're taking a look at this plan, let me know, is this something that you think would be good to use as is, or what else might you modify in here? And I see that BP and Jennifer are being super active in the chat, and I appreciate that. If others have thoughts as well, please jump in. So we have the first thing is welcome and provocation, why professional development fails under management. So facilitator could share most corporate professional development achieves only 10 to 20% behavior transfer unless managers reinforce it. Then it jumps to 70 to 90%. Stand up poll, how confident are you that your team's current professional development leads to real performance improvement? So we have a little bit of an anchor there. And then we have an activity where at tables, managers discuss some different pieces there. And then the next activity is a mini lesson on what makes professional development high impact. And there's some content there, but it doesn't give us all the content. It's giving us a little bit of content. I'm looking at some comments here. I like how it's aligned to instructional design luminaries. I like the anchor in there, quick activity that quickly focuses the class. I'm right there with you. I'm all about the anchor activity to focus the class. So we have an anchor. We have some content in here, and then core activity, professional development plan critique rounds. So managers review sample employee professional development plans and then ask some questions here. So we have kind of a group activity where they're critiquing some different professional development plans. And then after that, the facilitator demonstrates a professional development coaching conversation, which could be pretty interesting. And you have a role play in there. And then we have transfer and accountability, making the 30 hours actually count. So the facilitator guides managers to build a professional development accountability system using three tools: the 30-hour quarterly tracker, post-professional development reflection questions, and manager observation checklist. And we have a closing. So this is it's a pretty good, pretty robust plan. I'd love to hear some other thoughts, and I see Aaron has popped in here.
Well, I just wanted to do a time check because I think can you remind me what time we were going to stop?
We have about 4 more minutes.
Perfect. Okay.
Any other thoughts about this particular lesson? Like, how comfortable would you be in actually taking this and delivering it to tomorrow? BP saying, I think we're 90% there. And I like this kind of the sequence and flow. There's a few things that would make me anxious about delivering it, and that's the kind of the 90%. It's not 100% there. One is let's see, this mini lesson right here. So we have a 15-minute mini lesson, which looks like it's going to be a lecture, and then managers receive one-page high impact professional development checklist. And so I if I was delivering this, I would need a little bit more information. Like, what are the specific talking points to be shared here beyond some of these high level things? That's one of the things that I would need in here. Any other thoughts? It's a decent outline. I would want to flesh out the information and create the professional development plans. Yes, I'm with you, Patrick. All outlines and handouts still need to be made. Absolutely. When it comes to getting the materials, so this is the design phase. If we're going to actually develop something here, we actually do. Yes, we need all outlines. We need all the handouts. Might need some slides in here, some things like that. Any other thoughts? All right. Well, I'm going to. This is a good place to pause. And Aaron, if you want to bring folks back or give them the 1 minute warning or close the breakout room so they have 1 minute countdown or whatever it might be.
You bet.
Thank you all for jumping into that conversation. That was super helpful to not just sit there and stare at me as I'm trying to create this. I like that kind of group work here.
Brian, as we're waiting for everyone to come back, one thing that I noticed is in your, AI is looking for patterns. And so it had pulled up some information about Gagne, which you hadn't said anything in your prompt. And yet I'm guessing in previous prompts, you've asked about that. And so I thought that was really interesting how it was pulling those previous pieces together.
Yes, I may mention that, and BP had that kind of the super prompt,
Mhm.
that we use to design it, and that's actually one of the things that I include in a lot of my prompting. So. All right. It looks like we are being rejoined by folks from all the different groups. Is there still anybody outstanding, Aaron? Are we waiting for anybody else back?
I believe everyone should be back.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you all for jumping into that first activity there. We do have another one coming up, but before we get to that, what I do want to do, and I was here with folks that couldn't get into any of the breakout rooms, and so we were going through this, and one of the comments that somebody had at the very end was that what we created was a decent outline. I'd want to flesh out the information and create professional development plans. All outlines and handouts still need to be made. And that's perfect, right? So we what we want to do first is kind of get through what is our training plan? What's our outline here? And then once we feel really good about how the outline is taking shape, that's when we start to create the other materials. And so I'm kind of curious, and we're going to throw up a poll here just to get some thoughts. When it comes to the plans that you were able to create in your groups on a scale of 1 to 5, how close did you get your training plan to something you'd actually use? With 1 being not even close, 5 being I'd use this right now. Go ahead and get those thoughts in. We'll give you another few moments to go ahead and select the number. All right. So it looks like we had a lot of people that were somewhere between 3 and 4. A few people said 5. A few people were like, no, not even close. But one of the things that we're just trying to illustrate here, and especially it's certainly in the group that I was working with, we had some people who were very accustomed to creating and using some of these prompts. Some folks might be the first time that you've actually generated something using AI. Obviously, we have a range of experiences here. The first thing I'm going to ask in the chat, and so for our group, we use ChatGPT. Somebody said, "Oh, I'm looking at some of the different comments here." So go in the chat. Go ahead and share what tool you use. We use ChatGPT, but I'm also looking at a few of the other comments here. Our prompt and Copilot gave us a great jump start. Um, and then they wrote their prompt here, which was great. We did something similar where somebody actually suggested a super prompt that we used, and then it kind of used that as context to create the rest of it. I think the problem was learning prompt engineering. So yeah, we had some things going on. Blaine, go ahead and if you have something to share, go ahead and type it into the chat as well, because we'd love to hear your thoughts. So a lot of people are using Copilot. It looks like a few people use ChatGPT. Our org uses Copilot. I wanted to compare ChatGPT and Copilot, but never got around to input the prompt. That's actually so it is. It can be if you have some time, because while a lot of times we're using these terms interchangeably, ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, Gemini, they will generate something that's different, right? And so being able to compare maybe and figuring out which is going to be the tool that you use going forward could be really helpful. Camille wanted to compare. Okay, that's what you had said here. Tiffany, Copilot gave us these learning objectives. Identify barriers to employee engagement in training programs. Explain the manager's role in reinforcing learning and driving application. Apply strategies to integrate training into daily workflows and create an action plan to support their team's learning and measure impact. We start with the role of AI. We want to act like yes. So Amir, yes. So the idea, one of the things, and this was actually something that was a little bit new to me as well in the group that I was working with, was that we started with a prompt that kind of gave ChatGPT its role, right? You're an instructional designer, you're going to create something, and then it just kind of pulled Gagne's 9 events based on some other things that we had done initially. So I'm also curious. Oh, nope. Before we get to that, okay. So I'm also curious. How many times did you actually enter or refine your prompt? I think for our group, we may have refined it two or three times, maybe, in the time that we had together. Learning objectives from our prompt. So I'm starting to see some learning objectives. I'm seeing that Pamela's learning objectives include the first one is understand. And this goes back to just kind of what kind of learning design the models have been trained on in generating some objectives that clearly didn't take my train the trainer course and that is using the term understand why PD often fails. Um, but yeah, so a lot, and that's actually one of the things that we took a look at first in our own here in the large group as well was the learning objectives, making sure that those were spot on, and then we went through. And one of the things we found was that the first prompt that we used, it kind of generated something where managers were supposed to be checking their own professional development plans and then working with their direct reports. And we narrowed that scope so that it was just managers working with their direct reports because you would think that managers of managers would also be needing some of this as well. Uh, Yeah, I'm with you, BP, on that one. All right, so we have in terms of how many times you redid your prompts, just in the course of 15 minutes. Some people got it on the first try, and then a bunch of people were going between one and three or four different prompts, and that is kind of the experience, right? So using AI tools in order to generate something. It's interesting that some groups did get it on the first try, but typically, what will need to happen is just kind of you get a starting point, and you're like, all right, let's refine this. And then you get something else, and you're like, ooh, this is good. Let's keep this, but let's refine this, right? So that a lot of times that's where we'll get to. All right, so a few other chats, and then we're gonna have you do something else here. What did you? Well, we got to this one. I'm kind of curious. What didn't work for you? So when you put something in there, the first time you got a response, what didn't work for you? Christine saying we ran out of time. There was so much information that we didn't fully get through it. Yeah, sometimes, especially as you're generating training plans, it could be 2 hours or longer. It gives some good detail, and it's tough to go through it and evaluate how good it is in the course of 15 minutes. And that's something else to keep in mind is that when we're using AI tools, it doesn't necessarily mean that it instantly everything is good to go, right? So having taking the time you need in order to kind of go through what it generates and trying to figure out, okay, where do we need to tweak? One of the challenges that we ran into was that there was so it started with an anchor activity, which we all felt was really good. And then it got into a lecture element and it gave some talking points, but that's it. And it said, block 15 minutes for this. There's five talking points, and all it gave us was talking points. And so that's something that personally I would need to to expand a little bit more information on. Amir said, I think the time frame for each topic, that is actually a good thing to identify because it will give you learning objectives. And we got like 5 or 6 learning objectives for a 2 hour session. That's a lot of learning objectives. That's a lot of things that people need to be able to do newer, differently, or better during a 2 hour session. So I love the idea that I think the time frame for each topic needs to you need to keep an eye on that and figure out, do you want to go really broad because we just have a lesson plan that goes really broad, or do you want to go deep on anything that you have here? All right, so one of the other things that we didn't do yet. BP has a great suggestion there. Run it again for cognitive load, or ask it to scan for cognitive overload, something like that. So one of the other things that we didn't yet do, but something that AI can do, oftentimes it'll say, would you like me to create materials for you? Would you like me to create slides for you? Would you like me to create handouts? When it comes to best practices when using AI in the training materials, I found this really interesting article, and Rachel has put the link to it into the chat here. But it's an article that Nancy Duarte wrote for MIT Sloan Management Review and talks about what Gen AI tools can and can't do for presentations. And, it's a great article. I encourage you to read the whole thing. But basically, she's warning you about three very specific things when it comes to the action. So what we were just doing was kind of the design phase for instructional design. When it comes to developing and finalizing the materials, a few things that Nancy Duarte warns us about is that AI tools fail at strategic message design. Basically, the question is, does your end product reflect your business goals, your stakeholder priorities, your potential audience resistance? You might have a better idea about that than what your prompt has led AI to create. So that's one thing to be aware of. The next thing is empathy, really feeling about what's unspoken and being able to adapt in real time. So when it comes to the implementation of anything that's generated based on AI, it doesn't necessarily account for empathy. And then creative judgment is something else, right? So finding imagery and messaging that truly resonates with your audience. AI can create some beautiful things, but will it resonate with your audience? And so those are a few things to be careful about. We're going to put you back into your groups just briefly so that you can create just one thing. So for us, for example, the AI tool was suggesting that we create some different resources, some handouts. I'm going to put you back into your breakout rooms just briefly. We're going to take about 6 or 7 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is take that next step. So use that lesson that you created. And now, what would be just one material that you could come up with? And so just use that AI tool of choice, and be prepared to chat about what you created and how you had to iterate on that first thing that it generated. So we're going to go ahead and put you in those groups again, and then we'll see you back here in about 5 or 6 minutes. All right. Hello, group. I think we're back. So let me ask you if you remember what we were doing. There are a few things that it suggested that we have, especially here at the end. So does anybody have any BP saying, how about the checklist? So the manager observation checklist. And so let's see. Um, Please create the manager observation checklist. And for some reason, I try to be as polite as I can be to the AI tool. So I will use my manners and say please and thank you. And I don't know why that is. I guess it's just practice. Aaron, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I last time I was watching the conversation and wanted to jump in more often, so I decided I would join you for this part.
All right, perfect. And so what we have here is kind of an image of a checklist. And section one, preparedness and understanding. Section two, skill application, behavioral indicators. Three is integration and sustainability. Four is performance impact. Five is follow-up coaching needs. Six is summary and manager rating. Seven is next steps. This is kind of long for a checklist. Now, it's pretty complete, and it depends on how deep we want to go. But one of the things that I might do, and I'd love to hear other thoughts if you want to put those into the chat as well in terms of how you might modify that. But for me, what I need is a checklist that has no more than 3 sections, with no more than 5 items per section. Please modify this to have no more than 3 sections, no more than 4 items per section. All right, so we have some a simplified version here. Now we could go with that bigger version. We have a simplified version. Now, if we liked this, now if we didn't like it, we could keep modifying it, right? If we like this, it would be great if we had something. If I didn't have to go into Word and kind of design this, and so one of the things that I like is Generate in a Word. Uh, Patrick, all right, you're stalking me here. Section 6 seems like it would be hard to manage, right? Yeah, right. So if you go back up to the top, summary and manager rating. The professional development people will go after will be broad and will probably require a different separate measurement instead of this checklist. New section 2 is better than the original section 6. So the idea of skill application, yeah, especially if that's what we're aiming for, right? We're our problem is that we're not seeing people do something new or differently or better. I still might modify what we have here for understanding and readiness because one of the things is have we even checked in, right? So do we know what the skills gaps are? Have we checked in? Have we set goals prior to the professional development experience? I might modify that a little bit more. I like what you said, Patrick, in terms of section 2 seems better than section 6. And BP saying that's where you create a custom GPT to read or score their checklists. And so that's something else. So if people are filling this out as kind of a self-report thing, could be helpful as well. So one of the things I like to do is I like to, if I'm in a hurry and I feel like it's pretty good, I'll create a fillable PDF. But a lot of times, what I'll ask it to do is to create a Word document that I can then use. I can make the final massaging and finishing touches on it, and then I can use that as the handout. And so. This really does, in terms of speed, it makes things go a lot more quickly. And there's probably some activities in the actual training plan I wouldn't myself have used, but I like how they come up with them, and sometimes it helps get us outside of our own go-to activities. That said, going back to the research saying that our AI tools also kind of have their own go-to, whether it's assessment questions or assessment strategies or things like that too. So it's something to be careful about. Aaron, did you have any other thoughts?
No, I'm enjoying following along on this process, and we have 30 more seconds. So I
Perfect.
gave
Let's
everyone a warning.
perfect. All right. So there we are. Thank you again, BP Patrick and anybody else who added some thoughts and comments to that conversation because that's really helpful just to kind of go through this process and know what the other folks in the breakout rooms are going through as well.
We're gonna go ahead and bring everyone back.
All right, welcome back. And as you come back here, we had a chance to create a checklist, and that's what we kind of chose to do. And then we started to modify that checklist a little bit. And so I'm kind of curious, what did you create, and how did you have to iterate on it? So just kind of getting some quick thoughts in terms of what you were able to create in your groups and what you were we need 1 hour to think. Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things about this. And that's why when we did our session last month, we wanted to kind of create a foundation. And I also wanted people to practice, but we didn't have time for the practice. And that was what gave birth to this month's session, which was just using some of these tools and practicing. Because yes, it can save us time and it can lead us to thinking more critic. The time we're saving might be spent thinking a little bit more critically in terms of what would I change about this? Is this the right thing? Are these the right learning objectives? Is this the right tool? Or is this the right job aid that it's creating? Things like that. We asked Gemini to create templates for a professional development plan and a post-learning action plan. I asked it to create an accountability tracker template. All of the things that people are putting in here are absolutely fantastic. And one of the things that I love that oftentimes these AI tools do that I don't even always do when I'm creating lesson plans is here's I would use this resource in this section. Would you like me to create it? Sure. And then we can iterate on that, which is really helpful. Pamela said we created a behavior change checklist for the manager. Tiffany said that explain the manager's role in reinforcing and learning driving application. So we created a checklist and then we asked it to become more concise. And that's what we did in this room. It had like 7 different categories in the checklist, and that's too many. For me as a manager to have to monitor all of these different things. But what it did was it started with, the ideal, right? Now we can ask it to pare things down. Well, we've come to that time where an hour has flown by. We are at 54 minutes past the hour. And while I would love to continue these conversations, I just wanted to kind of make this concluding point that using these tools, whether it is Copilot, because that's what you're using at work, or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it might be, using these tools can help speed along the instructional design process. And there may be some other things that we need to do. Maybe it's higher level thinking. Maybe it's bigger picture thinking. Maybe it's more critical thinking. Maybe it's using our expertise in terms of what good learning design is in order to massage these to be the product that we want. Even though we kind of created some things really quickly, some people said, "Yep, I would use it tomorrow," but a lot of people said it still needs to have some work done. And that is kind of the tension that we're trying to handle when it comes to using AI for instructional design. Now, I would love to have these conversations and keep these conversations going, but we are at time, and so I'm going to share a few different announcements. If you would like to continue these conversations, there is a QR code on the screen that will lead you to a calendar link, and then you and I can nerd out about this stuff for a half hour or more. So if you want to talk a little bit more just in terms of training design, or if you want to help me continue to thrive when it comes to my one-word resolution, and wanted to talk about something that you have going on, I'd love to do that. Something else to keep in mind is that we are starting to offer a series of virtual train the trainer sessions, and we're starting to partner with a number of different associations that are out there. So if you happen to be part of an association that has membership that would like to benefit from some of these kind of more in-depth types of conversations, type ask me into the chat, and then I will reach out and we can have a little bit more of a conversation in terms of how we can bring some of this stuff to your organizations. Next month, we'll be talking about beyond engagement. And so one of our first webinars that we did in this series was just modeling some different training activities. And so I'll be digging back into our training activity cookbook and modeling some different activities and talking about how they're not just engaging, but these activities can actually lead to performance change and performance improvement. We also, if you'd like to connect with us on LinkedIn, please do connect with Endurance Learning. We'd love to continue the conversation there as well. We do have an AI tool that is focused on building out training plans, and so there is some information about it as well. And of course, I have some books out there. One that focuses more on instructional design, one that focuses more on big picture training strategy. And this might be a good, actually, if you stick around, we're going to do a drawing in just a moment. The last announcement that I wanted to make is that ATD has granted us pre-approved provider status. And so if you need to get CEUs towards your APTD or CPTD credential, scan that link and we can send you a certificate for this particular program. That is about it when it comes to the formal program. If you want to stick around, we're going to have a drawing, and we will also kind of stick around if you have some other information or conversation that you wanted to continue in the chat. So that's where we have. And that's kind of the end of our webinar, but let's get into the